All right, welcome to part 3 of So What Job Will I Get When I Finish a Music Course? So if you've watched part 1 and part 2, congratulations on getting this far. So in part 1 we heard from Foulface, some band guys who have done a great job of getting work. And in part 2 you heard from Monstera, and in part 3 you're just going to hear from me. So this whole series is about the question I get asked a lot by students and people thinking about enrolling in a music course, which is, what job am I going to get at the end? And unfortunately, it's there's not really any jobs to apply for. The music industry just isn't like that. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my own experience in terms of getting into the music industry and things that I've done. Because I've been a musician for, how long have I been a musician for? 25 years or so, doing professional gigs, and not once have I ever applied or filled out an application form for a gig. Every gig I've done has been through either bands that I was already in, or every band that I got into was through networking and knowing the right people and being good enough and things like that. So it's just not the kind of industry where you finish a degree and you go on to seek.com and look up for jobs for musicians and apply to be in a band. It's not really that type of industry. So I'm going to talk a bit about my own experience. So I'm just referring to notes. So in terms of me first getting started in the music industry, I think one thing I might talk a little bit about before that is actually you've got to be good enough. So you're, depending on what you're trying to do in the music industry or what type of bands you're trying to get into, because there's lots of different scenes, you have to be good enough, really, and that comes down to practice. I was fortunate my father taught me the guitar, and I came from a fairly musical family, so I was fairly good at a young age. And my dad was a musician, a guitarist, and my older brother was a bass player. So I was lucky in that I had connections and networks already there for me. So I feel very fortunate for that, and they really helped me get into my first bands and things like that. But not everyone has that, and I feel very fortunate that I had that. But not everyone has that, unfortunately. So. But that's how I kind of got into my first bands and first gigs, was through my dad and my brother, and through them I knew lots of other musicians, and that's the whole networking thing. I knew lots of bands. I went along to lots of gigs and watched lots of bands and things like that. But I'm not going to talk about that. What I want to talk about mainly in this video is the band that I'm currently in, which is a band called Phoenix, and sometimes it's called Savvy. I'll explain. And I play, the guy who runs that is a guy called Daryl Murphy, which I mention often in my class, in the classroom. I often talk about Daryl and the gigs that we do. So I'm going to talk about how we got our band started, because I think it's relevant and just shows kind of some of the commitment and determination and motivation that you need, and the things that you need to do to get started. So Daryl and I were already in a band. A covers band. We do covers gigs, not originals gigs, and we're doing some gigs with that. But we really wanted to start our own thing, and we were both at like a Sunday afternoon. I guess you'd probably call it like a markets thing in Rosalie, actually. And there was a band. There was a duo playing, providing a bit of entertainment to people wandering around. And Daryl and I and some other friends were walking around. And I said to Daryl, we could do that. We mainly sort of do gigs on Friday or Saturday night. I said, the two of us, me play guitar, you sing, we could be doing what those guys are doing then. He's like, yeah, definitely, let's do it. Because we wanted to get more gigs. We do gigs for our income, so we want to get as many gigs as possible. So we were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's start a duo. So the band we were in was actually an 8-piece band. Initially it was, as I said, just trying to get more gigs. So that's all very well to have the idea and look at a band and go, yeah, I reckon we could do that and we'd like to do that. But how do you actually do that? So these are the steps that we took. We didn't just waltz into, even though we were already doing gigs in the industry, we just didn't waltz into doing duo gigs. We actually had to put in a lot of preparation, planning, and all those kind of things. That's what I'm going to talk about, exactly what we did. So the first thing we did is we got together and we rehearsed. We rehearsed a lot, and we decided repertoire. We had lots of different types of repertoire. We had because to be in a covers band, you have to be very flexible. So we had to work out some cruisy repertoire. We had to work out some groovy repertoire, which is a little bit of a step up from cruisy with a bit more of a beat to it. And then dancey repertoire if we wanted to get gigs. We mainly focused early on in the sort of groovy, cruisy type of repertoire. And the dance stuff came later on. But so, yeah, we rehearsed a lot. And that was back in the day where it was much harder to find music and sheet music. So we had to buy books that had music in them and things like that. But we rehearsed a lot. So that's one thing. We first of all decided, we're going to do this. Okay, let's get together and rehearse. Then the next step was we started to, and this is back in the day before social media, to give you an idea of when this would have been early 2000s. I can't remember the exact year, but around the early 2000s somewhere. So it's before social media. So we had to record some demos. Back in those days, and I think it's still relevant now, people want to hear or see you. We recorded some demos. My brother was a bit into recording, so he helped us out recording some demos, and we just laid them down, and they turned out really well. And we burnt a CD. That was back in the day of when it was really pretty much just CDs. So we burnt some CDs, did up some artwork. So we did all that ourselves because we didn't really want to pay someone a lot of money to do that, and we kind of had the skills. So far we've decided repertoire, rehearsed a lot, recorded demos, and then we knew that we were going to get some gigs, hopefully. So we had to buy a PA system. We didn't own a PA system, so we couldn't just rock up to a markets with me with an acoustic guitar and Daryl singing. You need a PA system. So I think it cost about $5,000 at the time. So sometimes you've got to invest a little bit of money in yourself or your business or your band to get it started. That can sometimes you've got to spend a little to make a little. I think that's the saying. So we had to, it costed about $5,000, and we bought a PA system so that we were ready to go if someone phoned us up and said, "Hey, can you do a gig?" And we had our demos. So that up to that point, I might just go through that again. Decided we were going to start a band, a duo. We decided repertoire. We rehearsed a lot, many times, not just once or twice. We regularly rehearsed and bought a PA system, recorded some demos, got some CDs together. Now, I've known many bands who've gotten that far and then stopped. Because sometimes bands or people don't know what the next step is, which is actually getting a gig. So you can do all the preparation in the world. You could be this amazing band that rehearses every week on a Saturday morning in someone's garage, and you've got great demos, all that sort of stuff, but never get a gig. And I've known many bands and fellow musicians who have been in that situation. What's the next step? So what the next step for us was, and Daryl, the singer of the band, did a really great job of this, was getting out there. He approached venues, he approached agents, agents are people who book bands. They can be the person between the band and what might be a venue or a client. So there are lots of agents out there. And event organisers. There are companies that their whole job is organising events. So Daryl, he did a great job of it, took the CD and went and visited all of these people and different venues that he knew, and said, "Here's a CD, this is a band I'm in, this is a duo, if you want to book us, here's my phone number." I think we may have done up some cards as business cards as well. And that's how we got started. And I think our first gig, our first regular gig was just at a bar in New Farm. It was a place called Gertie's. I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's still there. I think it's got a different name. That was our first regular gig, and we did that sort of every second Sunday or so. So, you know, although Daryl took these CDs out there, not everyone booked us, obviously. You know, you're not going to have a 100% success rate. So handed out all the CDs, and then this bar, fortunately, gave us a regular spot on a Sunday afternoon. So that's kind of how we got started as a duo, and it's kind of grown from there. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I just want to sort of reiterate that the idea of let's start something, choosing some repertoire, rehearsing, because you've got to be good, and you've got to have enough repertoire. Most of the gigs we do, we play for about 4 hours. We don't play for 4 hours straight, but we take breaks. So you might need anywhere between 40 and 50 songs. So we had to rehearse a lot of repertoire so that we had enough for a whole gig. Record demos, burn CDs, do artwork, buy a PA system. We had to buy business cards. You know, CDs aren't free, burning them, all that sort of stuff. We had to figure all that out. But we were motivated. We knew that we had a good product, the two of us made a good team. And then the most important bit, as I said, some people just get that far. The most important bit was, okay, let's go out there and show people, you know, the CD and talk ourselves up and get gigs. So once we started, I often say your best advertising as a gig, your best advertising as a band. You know, you can have CDs, you can have websites, all that sort of stuff. But for us, what we found, our best advertising was just doing a gig. Most of the work that we got was from people seeing us. So back in those early days when we were just at this Sunday afternoon bar, restaurant, people would come and go, oh, we're getting married next year. Have you got a business card? We'd love you to sing at our wedding. And yep, sure, here's a business card. And we got a lot of work. Oh, we're having a party next week. Or, oh, my staff Christmas party is in a couple of months' time. We'd love to have you guys sing, play there. So that's how we got a lot of work from just doing those regular gigs. So that can be really beneficial, is people seeing you and going, let's have that. So we started to getting extra gigs, weddings, parties, which was great, and our business and our band grew from there. We got really busy quite quickly, which was great. So we were having a lot of success, and we're now sort of, it'd be getting close to 20 years later, we're still doing it. But it's very different to when we started. We started out as a duo, and then we realized that there was, basically we started adding musicians to it. So because sometimes people would say, hey, we'd like to book a band. Do you expand to a full band? And of course you say yes. You know, you don't say no. We say yeah, and then we figure out how to do that. So almost 20 years later, we're still doing it, still doing lots of gigs. On average, you know, we're obviously in post-COVID times, but on average, we would probably do 3 gigs a week, I reckon, on average. At least Friday, Saturday, a Sunday, maybe even a midweek gig. We do a lot of corporate gigs. For instance, this weekend, this is just a random weekend. Friday during the day, we're at a place called Smoked Garage at New Farm, in the Valley. And then I'm at Cloudland Friday night, and no gig on Saturday. Sunday, we're at Syrah May Winery out in Mount Cotton. So we get lots of work, so we're very fortunate, and it's grown into a good business. And it's, as I said, it's very different to when we started, but we're still going strong. So I guess to summarize, in conclusion, there's no part 4. Maybe there will be, I don't know, we'll see. But at the moment, there's no part 4. Just to sort of conclude all the 3 videos, if you want to get into the industry and get work as a musician, which is, I think, a lot of not everyone, but a lot of people who do a music course want to become a musician. Not everyone, some people want to do songwriting and things like that. But a lot of people want to become a musician but don't know how to get started or get gigs. So hopefully these videos have helped you realize how some people have been successful in getting gigs. I've spoken about my experience and the other bands who have done a great job in the originals scene. But I think there's a common thread amongst all of them is a motivation to succeed and determination. Putting money in, you've really got to be determined to do it. It's not just going to be handed to you and go, hey, here you go, join this band, you'll be right. Maybe that happens to some people, but most people know. So you really need to be determined and motivated. And I think above all, as well as that, you have to have a love of music. And I think those who are motivated and determined also have that love of music and love of performing. And I certainly have that. Even 25 years later, I still get a buzz from getting up and entertaining a crowd. I often get asked, what's my favorite gig, or what's my favorite type of music? Things like that. I often get asked that question. And in terms of gig, my favorite gig is not, I love it when we play this style of music, or like, it's not that. My favorite gig is when the audience love it. And when we're playing to an audience who is loving it and having a great time, the gig goes like that, flies by. But it's over before you know it. Great fun. My less exciting gigs, sometimes we'll do gigs and we're really in the background, no one's really listening. They tend to drag on, and they're not quite as exciting. But a gig is a gig. I do those gigs regardless. But in terms of my favorite gig, it's the ones where the audience is just having a great time. If they're having a great time, I'm having a great time as well. So yes, and that comes back to that love of music and love of performing. And I think for a lot of us, that's why we got into it, because we love music and we love playing. And I think if you've got that, the other stuff is easy. The other stuff will come naturally. So anyway, I'll sum it up. I've been talking for way too long. Well done if you got right to the end of this video as well. But hopefully you've learnt something. Hopefully it's answered some questions. Good luck.